Hello and welcome back to Random Librarian and to another two-part what I read in a month style video. So far this month, and it is mid-month, I think it is the 16th as I'm filming this, I have read 10 books. So let's get into talking about them. First off, we have this book, The Paris Library by Janet Skeslien-Charles, and this is about the American Library in Paris and their role in World War II, getting books to soldiers, delivering books to their Jewish patrons, and the everyday remarkableness of keeping a library running and running like a library during occupation. And it goes back and forth between two timelines, essentially. We've got Odile in Paris. Odile is our librarian at the American Library in Paris, and she's there during the occupation. And then we have Odile in Montana after basically becoming a war bride. She married an American soldier and moved to Montana. And there she meets Lily, who is her neighbor, and is just kind of fascinated by all things French. And that timeline kind of follows their friendship, and it's just really well done, in my personal opinion. And I know I'm biased because I'm moving to France, but it's also just extremely beautiful. So we've got like the inside, not the inside flap, the end papers that have postcards and letters and like things that she was communicating with her brother by letter because he was captured and as a prisoner of war. We've got this end plate from the American Library in Paris, and then on the back we've got some more of those like beautiful prints, and it's a library card due date, which I love. I think that's just such a fun touch. Also because the author herself worked at the American Library in Paris, so I just think it's a very great item. And this is the last author talk that I'm going to be doing for my current job, so I don't know, it's got a special place in my heart. Next up, and these are always, as ever, completely out of order, this is Mycroft Homes by Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, the basketball player, and Anna Waterhouse. I wrote this together. I thought it was just very interesting to take a character who's kind of shrouded in mystery the way Mycroft Holmes is in any kind of version of Sherlock that you pick up, and see his side of the story and like his adventures. So I think this is like at the start of his career in bureaucracy, and he and his best friend go abroad, both to follow Mycroft's fiance and to kind of figure out what's going on along the way, because they get attacked on the boat and like there's just a lot of things happening that they've got to unravel. So this was, like I said, I think it's like such an interesting take on an already beloved literary giant such as Sherlock Holmes. I don't know what made it not perfect for me. Just maybe the like timing of it, maybe that it's kind of hard to read a character who's just like so many steps ahead of everyone else around them and who doesn't really explain how they got to a certain outcome. But it didn't quite do it for me, but I am gonna give it to my dad, and hopefully he will like it more because he's very much a mystery kind of person. Moving right along, just read Sora Land by River Solomon. I am of the opinion that they can do no wrong, and this book continued and fed into that belief because just wow. Very different from their other works that I've read, but then again, each of their works is very different from each other. This is kind of a like hodgepodge, complete mixture of like both genres and plot, I absolutely loved it, and I thought it was genius. So it's got like a little bit of horror thrown in there. It's got a mystery in terms of like, there's part of it is medical horror, and the mystery is like what's happening to the main character. There's some government surveillance going on. There's parenting done completely like in the wild. Her kids are named Howling and Feral, which are just wonderful. And we've got some sapphic love stories, or at least one. And yeah, it says River Solomon Sora Land is a genre-bending work of gothic fiction. Here, monsters aren't just individuals, but entire nations. It is a searing, seminal book that marks the arrival of an unignorable voice in American fiction. And I completely agree. Read this book. Especially if you liked Mexican Gothic last year, I would say to pick this up because it's so good. We're not talking about this, but I read it. This, on the other hand, we should definitely talk about. Oh my gosh. This is so good. I do wish we got a little bit more of Nari being a con woman, because that's kind of my jam. But I loved this book so much. I want to buy the second one immediately, and I cannot because I am moving. So that's a thing that's happening. And it ends on such a like, no, you can't end it there, that yeah, like I said, I want the second book immediately. So I loved both like the magical elements and the human elements, and I am directly passing this to a friend. It's going to be in her hands as soon as I see her, and I am seeing her before I leave, so yay for her. There's also like a lot of politics going into this, and sometimes I hate politics in my fantasy, but I thought this was done very well because it's magical politics, and that somehow makes it more interesting. Next up, we've got The 10,000 Doors of January, which I think belongs on the magical libraries and librarians list that I've been accidentally creating. Even though he is a scholar instead of a librarian, it felt like he wanted to become a scholar just so he could hang out in the library, and I think that qualifies him. This kind of felt like the Erin Morgenstern Starless Sea. So it felt like that to me, but I liked this better. So this was a huge win for me. And it's, I mean, so pretty. So pretty. And has a very cool way of storytelling, and I love it when books do this, where you're following the one character, the main character, and their life, and then you're reading what they're reading, and that tells the other side of the story that like fills in the gaps. So big fan of this, and I know I need to read more of Alex E. Harrow's books, because Gideon, is it Gideon the Ninth and Harrow the Ninth? Are they both the Ninth? Anyways, that series just seems incredible. Autumn, the literary heroine, read it just the other day and was emotionally destroyed by it, so I feel like I should give that a go as well. And next up, I read the first in this trilogy by Laini Taylor, and I did enjoy this, but I didn't like it as much as her duology, Strange the Dreamer and The Muse of Nightmares. That was just kind of like next level for me, where this kind of felt more like a YA book, but like written for an older audience. And I love YA, but it's the heroine who doesn't know that she's the main character, I guess. And like a lot of her life is kind of hidden from her, but she's still kind of a manic pixie dream girl, in that she has these tattoos on her hands. She's got a lot of tattoos. She's got blue hair that she wished, so it does grow out of her head blue. It's just like who I would have wanted to be if I had been reading this as a teenager. And like I said, I did really enjoy it. There were some like twists and turns that I didn't really expect, and it's very imaginative. I enjoyed it, but again, just not quite as much. It felt like maybe it was rooted too much in the like humanity that I know instead of world building somewhere else the way it was in Strange the Dreamer. Yeah, I think that's really my main issue with it. That makes sense. And I am probably still gonna keep reading because it ends on a note that, holy shit, wasn't expecting. Akiva did a bad thing, and I want to know what the consequences are beyond, you know, getting broken up with. I'm just not sure if I'm gonna prioritize it before leaving. It might be something that I read on Christmas break when I come home. Finished this series. Ta-da! This is A Conjuring of Light by V.E. Schwab. It is the third book in a trilogy, and I mean, I enjoyed it. So I feel like part of this should have been just added to the end of book 2 because there's no reason for it to be this big. It felt like it ended in the middle of a sentence almost, the second book, because I was listening to it on audiobook and I was like, surely that can't have been right. Like I thought it skipped ahead because it really just like picked a strange spot to shut down. But I enjoyed seeing more of the other Londons in this one and seeing more of the ocean and the privateering or pirating that Lila so wanted to do. So we got to see more of that. Yeah, I mean, I enjoyed this. It's not like a top fantasy read for me, but it is a solid read. So I will find someone to give that trilogy to in the box set. I thoroughly enjoyed this. So this is a book that I've already talked about as a Magical Libraries librarian storyline. And the way that this book is crafted is very helpful to the reader because Sunny, who's our main character, she comes home to Nigeria after having been born and raised in New York City. So she, and no one else in her family has magic, so coming into this fully realized, fleshed out, and chaotic and intricate magical world, she is kind of overwhelmed and doesn't know what's going on, so we get to learn along with her and come to understand that side. And I also just very much enjoyed that the person with the most knowledge, so the librarian, is like the head of the entire conclave of magicians. I loved that. I thought it was so interesting the way that the magic worked, is that like as you learn things or as you team up with other people, as you get through challenges in new and interesting ways, like like money just falls from the sky essentially. And that's how you know you're advancing. And it just seemed like the best mashup of like a video game and like incredible fantasy movie, but also it's a book. I will definitely be reading book 2 in the second half of this month. And then I finally finished The Water Dancer. I have been just like on hold and like placing it off of hold and coming back to it for like a really long time, and it's a beautiful book. Oh my gosh. And obviously any storyline that deals with the American South during slavery is hard to read. But I loved this. So this is one of Shelby's favorite books, and so that's why I kind of picked it up and why I read it. And the magical realism of this is so good. Just read it if you haven't already. I mean, it's an Oprah, I think it was an Oprah book club pick, and it's a bestseller, and like you've probably heard this a million times about how great this book is, but it is, I need to be one more voice telling you because it was so, so good. All right, so that's what I read in the first half of the month. I am currently reading another like 3 books. I'm in the middle of them, probably more than that if I'm being honest. And I will see you at the end of the month for part 2. See you in like 2 seconds. Bye. Welcome back to part 2 of everything I read in September. So this month I did read a little bit less than last month. My total came in at 22 books, but I've been packing up and moving and finishing up my job and getting ready for the new one, so I think it's understandable. Okay, onward we go. I read 2 more N.K. Jemisin books. It has been such an N.K. Jemisin summer for me, and of course I think that that is just top-notch. I got the audio for book 3 in the Inheritance trilogy yesterday on Libby, so I'm excited to be finishing up this series. It is so good, and I really like that we're seeing the points of view kind of shifted between the different gods. So in the first one, we have the gods who are, you know, under lock and key, and the second one, we have the story after that from the god that they were put under lock and key by, and kind of what happens to him as he comes to see humanity as more than just nothing. The third one, sorry, is apparently Sia's story, and I love Sia, so I'm very excited to read that. The City We Became, I have seen this described as a little bit more confusing than the other 2 series that N.K. Jemisin has published, and I think that I was pretty lucky in having read How Long Till Black Future Month, which is N.K. Jemisin's series of short stories, because it has a like precursor or an original take on this, so it explains a little bit more, and like I had a better sense going in of what to expect. And I did like this slightly less than the other 2 trilogies that I've read from N.K. Jemisin, because I am more of a fan of fantasy set in a fantasy world where like the world building has to be stated, it has to be created and explained and woven throughout the story by the author. I think normally in stories that take place in places that you recognize, like New York City or in Ninth House, which takes place at Yale, there's this sense of like, oh, the reader knows where this book is set, so the author doesn't have to do as much work when it comes to the setting and the world, because there's kind of an understanding that the reader already knows it. But N.K. Jemisin is a genius, and I still liked this as a story, and I'm looking forward to reading what comes next, because just her imagination blows my mind. I'm gonna get the ones that I didn't like that much out of the way so that I can just finish on a high note and talk about the books that I loved, which is good. So I finally read Murakami, Norwegian Wood. This is a book that I've seen in a lot of those, this famous person likes these books, so I read them, which I love. Those are very fun videos. And Murakami, Norwegian Wood specifically, is one that comes up in a lot of those lists. It just didn't really do it for me. I think for the same reason that Conversations with Friends didn't really do it for me. In that it was kind of unsettling, and there was a lot of sex, but nothing really seemed to have a point. And I can understand why people loved it and why people continue to love it, but it wasn't for me. And that's that. Next up, I read The Ancestor, which is a book set at first in a town called Milton, which is the name of the town where I grew up, so that kind of threw me for a loop because it's in upstate New York. And Bert, Alberta Monti, receives a letter addressed to the Countess Alberta Montebianco, with a lot of other names thrown in there because apparently this family just likes giving all of the same names to everyone in their family. So it's kind of this like spooky story set in the Alps, and she gets sent to the castle in Italy and kind of gets left there in this very empty, desolate place to kind of figure out the family secret. So the first like bit of it in the setup is very fun. It just fell kind of flat for me in the ending, because much like how I felt with Norwegian Wood, it feels like we end up somewhere where we've come in a circle and like, what was the point? That's how I felt about this. We end up feeling like this story is just going to keep going and like going in circles because there's no resolution, and future generations are gonna have to keep doing this. But I liked the vibes, so at least there's that. And then I read Shiver by Ali Reynolds. So this is a Once Upon a Book Club pick, and they were very kind and sent me the box to unbox, so there's a video for that if you want to go check it out. And Once Upon a Book Club is very fun because every however many pages they'll give you a little note that says open your gift, and then you have a present that goes along with what's happening in the story. And my family are big skiers. One of the presents was a pair of goggles, so like at least for that reason, like woo, yay. But the story itself really didn't do it for me. We jump back and forth between the past and the present, and none of the characters are likable, first off, which is not always bad, but they're also not consistent, so that wasn't fun. There's a very frustrating love triangle, or as my friend says, a love angle, because it's the main character, his name I can't remember, Milla, the main character Milla, and then two guys, one of which is the older brother of her like snowboarding nemesis. And from the start, she likes the brother better than she likes the guy she actually ends up sleeping with. And so she doesn't try to have a relationship with the brother because she thinks it'll distract her from her snowboarding. Yeah. I hate a love triangle. And then they get trapped up in the ski lodge, and there's this whole thing where people are trying to figure out who killed her nemesis because she's been lost for like 10 years. And there are like no clues to tell you how, like what happened. And it just really, I was not satisfied as a reader. But I got a pair of goggles out of this box, so they had some pluses. Finally finished The Elegance of the Hedgehog. This is a book that I was leading a book discussion on, so I was reading it in French with my library patrons. We read a certain number of chapters every time, came back and discussed, and I think if I'd read it all in one go, I would have liked it better, because I know a lot of people really enjoy this, but reading it really slowly kind of made me forget what was happening between everything going on. The end really did get me. I cried a lot of things, but yeah, it was kind of heartbreaking. Interestingly enough, they made a movie in France that's like loosely based on the book, and the ending is very different in that like someone else gets killed at the end of the movie than the person who gets killed at the end of the book. And it was very strange. I also finally read The Alchemist. So this is a very fun, very short story, inspiring, makes you want to like go out and do stuff and like follow your own personal story. And, you know, I'm glad I finally read it. I'm gonna go pop it into a little free library now. Octavia Butler is a genius, and I will accept no slander because holy shit. So The Parable of the Sower is book one of, I think, a duology, and it is set in a future for her world of 2024, where everything is kind of fallen apart. The world is in chaos, or at least the United States is, and people are kind of just roving the streets. It opens with Lauren, our main character, who has an empathy problem in that if she sees someone who's hurt, she feels their pain. When she was younger, she would bleed if she saw someone bleeding. So at the beginning, Lauren is in a gated community with her family, her father, her stepmother, and her stepbrothers, and she takes care of all of them. She's coming up with her own version of a religion and trying to figure out how to start said religion and start said, I don't want to say cult, but like a home where everyone works together to support the community and all believes in Earthseed, while the world is in shreds. And I am still not convinced that Octavia Butler can see the future, so let's work to not have this happen. Next up, it has been a very nutty Okafor month for me. I read the first 2 stories in the Binti Trilogy, and the 3rd is going to be available quite soon, so I'm very excited for that. This is just incredible sci-fi. I am amazed by how much she's been able to put to the page and imagine in such a short amount of time, because so this is the trilogy is in 1 book. So there's been 2 books within 200 pages, and I've got another 150 pages essentially to finish it up, and there's so much going on here. I think Binti is like the best main character just in general, but also specifically for a science fiction future kind of world. She's curious, she's smart, she's a great way to like introduce new topics and like new ideas to a reader. She's a mathematician. She discovered this like mysterious device in the desert around her home before going to university. And in the first story, on her way to university, they get attacked by a group of meduse, which is a jellyfish-like sentient people who have been at war with the Kush, which I think is a type of, like another more humanoid type of people out in space. But they attack the ship and kill everyone except for Binti. So Binti is also, through her work, her mathematician's mind, is what's known as like a harmonizer. So she finds a way to negotiate peace, not just like for herself and the pilot to get to university, but also for the meduse and the rest of the universe, essentially. And then in the second book, we see her deal with a lot of PTSD, and I just think it's all handled really well. And even though there's a lot that happens in a short amount of time, it doesn't feel rushed, and I never felt left behind by the stream of the story. So I'm really excited to read book 3 and figure out what happens for Binti out in the desert with her grandmother's people, who have a whole different set of thoughts and powers and things introduced to the story this late, and I'm just blown away. And I read book 2 of this series. So Akata Witch was the previous one. This is Akata Warrior. This series is like pretty dark for the age group, because like I thought this was maybe middle grade, but like maybe young adult, because in the first book we have a ritual killer and they have to go and like risk life and limb to go and stop him, and they're young kids, young teens, I guess. And in this one, the end of the world, the apocalypse is coming, and it's up to Sunny and her 3 friends to go and make sure that that doesn't happen. Also, Sunny has been bullied, like, a lot. In the first one, we see her being bullied in Nigeria by her current classmates, and in this one, we get a truly heartbreaking tale of her being bullied at her American school, and also her shame at like snapping back. It's just very nuanced and great, and I am in awe. Also, very complicated relationship with her family because she is a leopard person and they are not. They don't know about magic. Her brothers especially have a weird relationship with Sunny because she's the only girl. I just loved it so much. So if you are looking for like a unique magical system set outside of the United States, which is always a great idea, may I present. And then finally, I snuck this one in right at the last minute for a last edition. This is my 22nd book of September, and it is the start of a series that everyone seems to love. So this is Mistborn by Brandon Sanderson. Again, it has a very unique magic system. So this was very fun to read, and I am so glad to be part of the group of people who have enjoyed this now. I wouldn't say it's my favorite fantasy, so maybe book 2 and book 3 will change that because they're small, so I have included them in my carry-ons for moving to France. And yeah, I guess we'll see. But if you haven't heard of this, the magic system is metal based. So if you have certain metals in your system, you can burn them and that will increase, it can like increase your strength and your durability. If you burn pewter, you can essentially fly if you push against metals. And you can pull metals to you, so pushing and pulling are two different things. You can affect people's emotions either by rioting them to make them, you know, obviously feel their emotions more strongly, or soothe them to soothe. Then there are other kinds of metals as well. And at the end, there's this very helpful little thing. The audio and the trade paperback do have some significant differences in sentence structure and word choice, which was kind of alarming when I was listening to it. This was also a book that was 25 hours long on audio and is, despite being pretty small looking, still 643 pages. So I think the other two are even longer. And I have started quite a few other books as well during this month. For example, To Sleep in a Sea of Stars, which is 33 hours on audiobooks, so I'm gonna try to dive into that next. And it is also another science fiction novel. Other things that I am in the process of reading, I have City of Girls, which is historical fiction set in New York in a playhouse. I started The Lager Queen of Minnesota, which I'm not sure if I'm gonna finish, but like I'm interested in seeing where it goes. It's more of a family drama where one of the sisters got the farm and ended up turning it into a beer making business, and the other sister kind of had to scrimp and save, but now she is getting recognition as one of the best pie makers in Minnesota, and her children die tragically. So her granddaughter, I think, comes to live with her and then maybe makes a reconciliation happen between the sisters. So there's a lot going on. It's also one that bounces back and forth between the past and the present. So yeah, I'm just not sure if I have the space to read that today. And I got the audio for The Immortal Life of Henrietta Lacks, which is something that I've been wanting to read for a really long time. So that is everything that I read in the month of September. I now have a good long chunk of time to just exist before starting my new job. I'll be in the US until September 7th, so very soon, probably after you see this video, and then I don't start work until the 18th, so I get a little bit of time to, you know, bounce around Paris, but also find an apartment and make sure I have somewhere to live for the coming year, if not years, in France, and we'll go from there. I have snuck quite a few books into my carry-ons and my luggage, so I'm pretty proud of that. So hopefully I can find a way to be a bookworm, an Anglophone bookworm in France, specifically at Fontainebleau. So, that's what's going on with me. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, do all the things that people tell you to do when they have a YouTube channel. I am very close, or feels like I'm very close to 1,000 subscribers, which is wild. So thank you for that, and I will see you in another video. Maybe on this side of the ocean, maybe on the other. Bye.